Hello, fifth grade fantasy readers. By now, I hope that you're really into your fantasy novels and you have discovered why they come from such a unique genre. I want to take a moment to review what we discussed last week. The importance of setting in fantasy stories. The world can start off in an unrealistical and magical place right from the beginning. And sometimes you can start from a world that you know, and then you transition into a world that leads into another magical place. And sometimes you start off with a world that doesn't even exist. It's a future realistic world. One thing is for sure, the setting plays almost like a character in our fantasy novels, and we need to be aware. I want to focus on the characters and the plots today. Readers, I want to discuss with you another way to understand and identify clues when the author wants us to notice them in their writing. One thing I know for sure is that fantasy reading can be difficult, and the author always tries to give the reader a little bit of extra information by providing this information through the mouths of their characters. One character might just describe an incident or a legend or even a part in history, and the author is just hoping that you pick up on this. The fact is that you're really learning alongside the other characters. The author is hoping that you are alert as a reader and you know when this is happening. Sometimes it will help you fill in the gaps so that you're able to comprehend the text a little bit better. Often the main character has a dramatic experience and the characters come away with new realizations because of it. We are learning at the same time as the main characters and on the same learning curve. And this often happens during fantasy stories. I would like you to listen to this clip that takes place in Narnia. It's a time when Mr. Tumnus, which happens to be a magical faun in this magical place, and he meets this girl, Lucy, and she's a human, and they meet and encounter each other for the very first time. Listen carefully. Can you pick up on the clues that the author wants you to?
If you don't mind my asking, what are you?
Well, I'm a thorn. And what about you? You must be some kind of beardless dwarf?
I'm not a dwarf. I'm a girl. And actually, I'm tallest in my class.
You mean to say that you're a daughter of Eve?
Well, my mum's name is Helen.
Yes, but you are, in fact, human.
Yes, of course.
What are you doing here?
Well, I was hiding in the wardrobe in the spare room. And
Spare room? Is that in Narnia?
Narnia? What's that?
Oh, there you go. You're in it. Everything from the lamppost all the way to Castle Cair Paravel on the Eastern Ocean. Every stick and stone you see, every icicle, is Narnia.
It's an awfully big wardrobe.
I'm sorry, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Thomas.
Pleased to meet you, Mr. Tumnus. And Miss Pevensey.
She sticks out her hand.
Oh, you shake it.
Why?
I don't know. People do it when they meet each other.
He reaches out, he grabs a hold of her hand, and shakes it. At that moment, we soon learn that Mr. Tubnus was learning right beside Lucy what it means to be human. As a reader, we are pulled into his thoughts and his feelings as he questions Lucy about that handshake. This happens all the time in fantasy stories, and we hope you pick up on the clues. I want you to think about your fantasy books and how they're different than your fantasy chapter books. When you were little, and perhaps even now, you would enjoy a picture fantasy book. Although authors often will describe the settings and the stories have main characters, there are usually only a few characters and only one central problem or plot to the story. we can pretty much figure out exactly what's happening and can easily retell the story. When we listen or read books like Where the Wild Things Are, the pictures help support our reading. And they also do this in books like The Lorax. We will be lucky today because Mrs. Foltz will be sharing this book with us. I want you to take a moment and I want you to read through this chart I'm providing. We didn't need to take notes in those books that I just mentioned. As I mentioned, that they are easy to retell and they're pretty simple. But when you are reading from fantasy chapter books, they are not as simple. They have multiple plots and many characters. And those characters evolve and change throughout the stories. So today I'm going to share with you a way that I keep track when I'm reading a book such as a fantasy. You might think it's pointless to keep track as you read, but I can assure you it will help you comprehend the novel and keep these multiple plot lines straight as you continue to have your story unfold. When you have time to evaluate your characters and you truly understand information from their point of view, you are also able to connect even more to the world that they live in. This is just one way, is through this chart. Having it in a Google Doc allows you to add information about your characters as they continue to evolve and change in your story. I always tell my students to refrain from making assumptions about their characters at the beginning of their stories, because as the characters are bound to change because they're dynamic. And this happens all the time in fantasy stories. In this lesson, you will find a similar chart that has been provided for you. You may keep track of your characters' personality traits, actions, and the background information. And perhaps you might even want to add information that your mind has changed about as your story continues to unfold. You are going to be kind of a detective of sorts when filling it out. We truly hope that you're enjoying the fantasy story that you're reading. Don't forget, you should be reading about 20 minutes per day, and our goal is to be done with our books by May 25th. You will find a video that was read by Mrs. Foltz today. She's going to be reading The Lorax. There will be a few questions in the Google form marked checking for understanding. There will also be a few questions about the novel that you're reading. Once you're done with the form, press submit and then press the turn in button. The chart is for you to add, change up, and make your own. You won't be graded on this, but we would encourage you to use this. Or perhaps keep track in a notebook. The characters in your fantasy story are complex and the plots change regularly. This is a great way to keep track. I sure miss all of you. Now off you go and enjoy your reading.